Hey everyone, my name is Eva and I decided to do my project on Dr. Martin Luther King. My topic for the class was ethnic minority, and I decided to do Dr. King due to the amount of inspiration that he had on so many people. He achieved so much through his different movements and by founding the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. I decided to do a memorial of a time frame of his life through his different movements. Though I'm missing a couple, I did achieve getting most of them. I did decide to do his early years throughout his education, including his assassination and everything in between. I decided to do that to show that even though he made a huge impact on many, he was also hated by some as well. The bottom of my project is his I Have a Dream speech. However, it's about the third paragraph in. I chose to do that because it's what's often used by those who mention him in their own presentations or speeches, and it's what's often remembered. I decided to do the font large in the beginning and small in the end because though it empowered many and it was a very empowering speech, for some it was one ear and out the other. I feel that if many would have given him the time of day or listened to what he had to say, maybe their feelings would have been different on ethnic minorities. However, some were just set in stone, and that's how they were raised, and those were their beliefs. Nothing probably could have changed their mind. For each photo that I have posted, I decided to give a brief description, so I will try to keep the video short. However, I will be speaking on each photo, so please bear with me. Martin Luther King Jr. was born January of 1929. A quick fun fact is that he was actually born Michael Luther King Jr. due to a typo in the hospital. However, he was able to get that fixed later in life. He attended a segregated school from K through 12th grade and graduated high school at the young age of 15 in 1944. Like his father and grandfather, he attended Morehouse College, an all-black college in Atlanta, Georgia, where he received a BA degree in sociology in 1948. He attended Crozer Theology Seminary in Pennsylvania, where he received a Bachelor of Divinity degree in 1951. He attended Boston University, where he began a doctoral studies in systematic theology, and he also attended Harvard University. He received a PhD in 1955. From 1957 to 1967, Dr. King received a total of 20 honorary degrees from various colleges and universities around the U.S. and several foreign countries. Dr. King was involved in the citywide bus boycott. However, that began with Miss Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks was an African-American woman who refused to give up her seat to a white passenger on a segregated Montgomery bus. Although she was seated in the colored section, she was arrested and booked for violating the Montgomery City Code in 1955. She was found guilty of December 5th of 1955. She was fined $10 and assessed $4 in court fee. Dr. King was elected to lead the citywide bus boycott, which lasted a total of 381 days. Overall, Montgomery lifted its enforcement of segregation on public buses due to the massive financial loss the lawsuit caused the city and the lack of colored people riding the bus. As a result of the boycott, Dr. King's home was destroyed by a bombing in January of 1956. Rosa Parks eventually had to leave Montgomery due to the loss of both her and her husband's job. They were able to begin a new life in Detroit, Michigan in 1957. In 1957, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference was founded. Dr. King and several of his colleagues recognized the need for a national organization to help coordinate their efforts. They founded the Southern Christian Leadership Conference to help conduct nonviolent protests to promote civil rights reform. This gave Dr. King a base of operation throughout the South as well as a national platform. Dr. King was inspired by Gandhi's success so much that he visited Gandhi's home in 1959. He hoped to get inspiration to lead peaceful protests within his own movements. In 1960, began the Civil Rights Sit-in. Dr. King was inspired by Gandhi to practice nonviolent peaceful protest, and as a result, he inspired others to adopt that practice as well. The Civil Rights Sit-in began with 4 college students who entered a whites-only cafe and ordered coffee. Though their order was refused, they sat patiently. Despite threats and intimidation, the students sat quietly and waited to be served. This sparked a movement that led to many restaurants dropping their policies of segregation. By the end of the school year, over 1,500 black college students had been arrested. However, with each set of students removed came another ready to take their seat in the sit-in. The students faced a lot of violence from the white community who did not agree with what they were doing. They had to deal with food being poured or thrown on them, physical attacks, and even an effort to get protesters to react with no results. Later, Dr. King led a conference to guide students on strategies with how to best accomplish peaceful protests. This led to the student forming the Students' Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in 1960, which lasted about 6 years. The Birmingham campaign was not one of the favorites. It began in 1963. Birmingham, Alabama was culturally and law enforcement one of the most racially divided states in the U.S. The Birmingham campaign began in hope to get pull from the white community on how awful black citizens were treated in Birmingham. Led by Dr. King, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference decided to use children to show how heartless the white community members and law enforcement included are the black community, regardless of age. Both high-pressure hoses and attack dogs were used against protesters. Although a bit extreme, it was necessary to get results and attention of not only citizens around our country, but those from the Soviet Union and Western Europe. Dr. King was put in jail for other reasons, but also for putting children in harm's way. They settled for less than demanded, but results slowly started to appear in Birmingham. Stores, lunch counters, restrooms, and drinking fountains were desegregated within 90 days. Change began with hiring blacks in stores as salesmen and clerks without discrimination. All right. The March on Washington began in 1963. It was a massive protest when some 250,000 people gathered in front of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. The march was a merge between A. Philip Randolph's plan to march for jobs and Dr. King's and his Southern Christian Leadership Conference to march for freedom to create one mass protest. The event aimed to draw attention to continuing challenges and inequalities faced by African Americans a century after the emancipation. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his famous I Have a Dream speech there. In August 23rd of 1968, he did deliver his famous speech, I Have a Dream. He delivered it at the March on Washington. The speech was a reference to highlight the many successful protests and movements that had occurred. Dr. King was the beginning to the end of segregation in schools, restaurants, restrooms, and even water fountains. People reference his speech when leading their own marches or even giving a presentation for ethnic discrimination. The Civil Rights Act ended segregation in 1964. The act ended segregation in public spaces and banned employment discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. It is considered one of the crowning legislative achievements of the civil rights movement. The Voting Rights Act in 1968 gave African Americans the right to vote without having to face discrimination. During the civil rights movement, the voting rights activists in the South were subjected to various forms of mistreatment and violence. During a civil rights movement march from Selma to Montgomery, protesters were faced with various forms of mistreatment and violence, such as being attacked with nightsticks, tear gas, and whips by the state troopers after they refused to turn back. Signed into law by President Lyndon B. Johnson, aimed to overcome legal barriers at the state and local levels that prevented African Americans from exercising their right to vote as guaranteed under the 15th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. This Voting Rights Act, though gave African American people the right to vote, they still face a lot of hate. And lastly, Dr. King was assassinated April 4th of 1968. The one good thing that came was the Equal Housing Bill, which was approved soon after. Martin Luther King was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee, an event that shocked the world. He used a combination of impassioned speeches and nonviolent protests to fight segregation and achieve significant civil rights advances for African Americans. His assassination led to an outpouring of anger among Black Americans, as well as a period of national mourning that helped speed the way for an equal housing bill that would be the last significant legislative achievement of the civil rights era. Dr. King's death caused a rift with the Black and white community, resulting in an uprising of riots. Killing the most influential Black man in history resulted in the fallback to everything he taught the mass community. Though the riots and even the fallback to his achievements was temporary, it was still hard to see. He was able to teach so many that you were able to accomplish so much without the need of violence. However, when someone took Dr. King from the world, what was the point of it all? What was the point of one of the most peaceful men in history to be murdered in cold blood? This project was very important to me because I was able to learn a lot from this class. Stuff that I probably should have learned in high school and even middle school, but due to certain circumstances, I wasn't able to. I'm glad that I had the opportunity to learn that everything that I was able to, not only about Dr. Martin Luther King, but about many ethnic minorities. Of course, like many others, Dr. King was just very empowering and very inspirational to me. And I hope to be able to make changes, or even just make the change to one person's life like he did for many others. I added a works cited page or piece to my board as well. However, it's hardly noticeable down there. Though I know my board is simple, I feel like it had a lot of information about the achievements from Dr. King. I look forward to reading your guys' comments, and I look forward to the discussion on all of our posts. I hope you guys have a great finals week, a great summer, and if you're taking classes, best of luck. You guys all have a good evening. Bye.